Definitely a very special video. As you can see from the title, we are going to be delving into a more specific talk about economics and finance. So, one of the big things that we're going to be talking about today is inflation and the whole mystery of inflation that we've seen for about 10 years now, and the mystery of a lot of price level changes, and definitely changes in the economy in terms of the way certain models have broken down recently. So I've talked about the Phillips curve before. I'll probably make a whole video dedicated to the Phillips curve because that was basically the first evidence of economic modeling that I was taught through school. That it was just obvious. It was just the fact that, hey, the Phillips curve is this, and in theory, okay, makes sense. I answer that correctly on a test, but does not follow that model in the United States and or the rest of the world. So that's something that I'm going to want to see a change on, and I'm going to make another video for. This video is going to be squarely focused on the quantity theory of money. So for anyone that doesn't know the quantity theory of money, it's basically a concept that started with Copernicus in the 16th century that was trying to describe inflation. So trying to describe what leads to inflation, what may cause inflation, and what correlates with inflation. So another kind of similar aspect with the Phillips curve, but instead of using unemployment, we are looking at a couple of different things. Now the first thing we're going to look at is the Fisher equation. It's basically the basic equation for the quantity theory of money, and it's expressed as MV equals PT. Now, obviously, you can see what MV, P, and T are expressed as individually, and that's basically supposed to be thought of as a correlation between your money supply and your price level. So in this situation, if your volume of transactions of goods and services or your output doesn't change, and your velocity of circulation doesn't change, then as your money supply increases, so does your price level. And that's one of the biggest assumptions that you get. So we're looking at the quantity theory of money states that there's a direct relationship between the quantity of money in an economy and the level of prices of goods. Level of prices of goods and services sold. So if the amount of money in an economy doubles, price levels also double, causing inflation. Now, as you can see, the original theory was considered orthodox during 17th century classical economists. It was overhauled by 20th century economist Irving Fisher, who formulated the above equation in Milton Friedman. Now, that's the other big thing. So, as you can see here, invented by Copernicus, showing the proportions, was challenged by Keynesian economics, and I personally, myself, in no way Keynesian. So I do not consider myself Keynesian. I don't believe in the Keynesian economic model. I don't think it works. So I don't want to make it seem like I am advocating for a Keynesian model here, but I'm definitely criticizing this model here that is thought of to be as a classical model itself. And so the first thing we'll go into here, which this link here really showed it very well, economics.help. This guy, Tavon Pettinger, in 2015, basically talks about the link between money supply and inflation. Now, increasing the money supply faster than the growth in real output will cause inflation. Yeah, we do know that. Examples of increased money supply causing inflation because, as according to the classical model, you increase the money supply too much, you will cause inflation, that will cause an economic failure. And there's evidence to back that up. You got the U.S. Confederacy, you got German hyperinflation in Zimbabwe in 2008, you got Venezuela now is going through the same issues, and definitely it's happened, it's a possibility. All those scenarios are with government-caused inflation, so it's the government basically printing money, and then causing that inflation to spike. And as you can see, increased money supply can translate to inflation based off this long-run aggregate supply and demand curve. in this chart here, if real output does not change, you're just going to see a rise in inflation. And if you see your output do change, you may not see a change in inflation. That's according to that model. Now, it's hard to measure money supply. Now, what we're looking at here is quantitative easing. So quantitative easing is obviously something that we definitely gone through in terms of a crazy amount starting in 2008 with the financial crisis. So as you can see, the monetary base here, monetary base is adjusting for the liquid currency and deposits in our economy. You can see that absolutely exploding once you hit 2008. And it's something that just now is starting to decline. But the Federal Reserve created money to buy bonds from commercial banks. Banks all rise in their reserves. So they didn't really lend the money out to commercial banks, this money that they got. So that's why the broader money supply, you don't see a giant change, your M2. But you saw commercial banks see a rise in their reserves. So it's a way to kind of solidify their balance sheets, to kind of put more confidence back in the, honestly, the world and the international banking system, because that's something that was a big problem at that time. So now that we look at it, you could see 2008, 2009, your inflation is not dictated by that. So now they're like, oh my God, you're gonna print out all this money. How are you gonna avoid a Confederacy? How are you gonna avoid the German inflation in Zimbabwe? What you're gonna do is, instead of taking all this money, injecting it into the economy, and seeing that move through people's hands, you're not going to do that. You're going to inject this money into the economy, and the central bank is going to basically take that money on as an asset on their balance sheet, and then have the banks use that to increase their reserves by borrowing from the central bank. So that's something where you're not seeing the circulation. You're seeing the circulation of it go down tremendously. So one chart that I wanted to show as well, which is big in this, is the velocity of M2 money stock in the United States. This is since 1959. Now, if you look at this, this is crazy. So this is starting from 1959. If you start from 1985 here in your monetary base, you're talking 1985, and you see that stuff start to go higher. Now your velocity stock definitely goes higher at the same time your monetary base does. But you hit a peak at about 2000. And if you look at in 2000 here, you hit a peak, but you keep on going. So right now, you're looking at your peak in 97, really, then 2000, you start to see it really drop off as soon as you get the dot-com boom, and your velocity of your money goes down. So this is money going into central banks and going into commercial bank balance sheets and not being touched.
This is money going into,
so not being sent out to leverage, and especially in 2008, you see that drop off tremendously, and it's honestly never going to come back because of things like Dodd-Frank and different structural reforms that we made to strengthen our financial sector, but at the same time have made indirect consequences. So with Dodd-Frank forcing those commercial banks to hold more of their money and have a higher reserve ratio, they're no longer being able to leverage that out as much and leverage themselves out as much. So this is why you see your velocity coming down tremendous level. Like you're looking at a 30% drop in a matter of 10 years, like something that's a very, very big drop. Something that could definitely be a cause of why we haven't seen that inflation pick up with that money stock that's increased. Now, let's look at this chart that I wanted to show everybody. So, as you see in this little spreadsheet, we'll actually zoom up this chart. And just to show you guys, this chart is we'll actually zoom inflation versus the federal funds rate versus output correlation. So this is coming back from 1954 to 2019, sometimes 2020, and we're focusing on
so this is coming back from
three things: inflation rate,
to 2019,
your Fed funds rate,
2020,
and your
we're
output.
focusing on
Now, if we come back here, you're looking at the blue as your inflation rate.
your Fed funds rate.
The red is your Fed
and
funds
your
rate,
output.
and the yellow is
Now,
your
if we come
is
back
your
here, you're looking at blue
real GDP growth
as
rate.
your inflation
So
rate.
now, as you can see
The
here,
red is your
we
Fed
do
funds
kind of
rate,
see this
the yellow is
increasing from
your-
54 to about 74.
Real GDP
We
growth.
that's where we do see that
So
drop,
now,
that
as you can
recession
see here,
occur.
we do
It's the
kinda
first
see this increasing from
pretty
54
major
to about
recession since after World
74.
War II.
That's where we do see that
Now,
drop, that recession occur.
You do see
It's the
again
first
that
major
inflation
recession since after
and
World War II.
that Fed funds rate kind of
Now,
in tandem, moving
You do
up
see
as they
again
do,
that inflation
as they don't do, as
and that Fed
a lot of
funds
people
rate
you'll see on the
kind of
news now.
in tandem.
They're saying, "Oh, the Fed's going to cut
As they
rates
do.
to try to boost inflation."
As they
Fed's going to try to
don't-
cut rates to try to
A lot
boost
of people
inflation.
you'll see on the news now.
Excuse
they're
me?
saying, "Oh, the Fed's going to cut rates to try to boost."
Look what
inflation."
happens when the Fed tries to
Fed's gonna
cut
try to
rates.
cut rates to try to boost
If
inflation.
you look again here, the
Excuse
red
me?
is your Fed funds rate.
Look what
Every
happens when
time
the
you
Fed
see
tries
that
to
cut
rates.
go on from here down,
Look
from
again
here
the
down.
red
Does your
Fed
inflation
funds rate.
improve? Maybe
Every
marginally
time you
one
see that
one
cut
year,
go
but not
on
usually.
from here
You're
down,
usually seeing
from
drops
here
of
down.
inflation.
Does
Drops.
your inflation improve?
Drops.
Maybe marginally
Like,
one year.
There's no lagging
usually.
indicator
You're
or
usually
anything
seeing
like that.
drops
Unless
of
they're
inflation.
perfectly in
Drops.
tuned,
drops. Like
you're more likely
There's
to
no
see a
lagging
correlation the other way
indicator
than you
like
are
that,
with
unless
cutting
they're
rates and seeing a
perfectly
rise in
tuned.
inflation. So, inflation
you're
being a
more
reason
likely
to
see a
cut
correlation
rates
the
in
other
this
way
current
than you are
environment,
with
in
cutting
my
rates and
case,
seeing a rise in
is kind of bullshit.
So,
Um,
inflation being a reason to
And
cut
this is
rates
one
in this
one
current
thing that
environment,
I do believe
in my
that
case,
proves it.
is kind of bullshit.
Now, another thing I want to look at definitely
And
is
this is one thing
in
that
terms
I
of,
do believe that
all right,
proves it.
so what is wrong?
Now another thing I want to
Now, what is wrong, I believe, is the classical approach.
in terms of
And the classical approach
Alright,
is
so what is wrong?
increasing the money
Now,
supply
what is wrong,
equals
I believe, is the
inflation.
classical approach. And the classical
Not true.
approach is
Now, there's a whole nother
increasing the money
segment
supply equals
to this
inflation.
that I'm going to do as a part 2
Not true.
that I'll try to get
Now,
out again tonight.
There's
That
a
is
whole
going to
nother
be
segment to this
less
that I'm gonna do as a
analytical,
part two,
but it's going to be more
that I'll try to get out again tonight. That is
definitely
going to be
layman and definitely more
less analytical,
understandable, and I'm
but
going
it's
to
gonna be more-
show you the real world consequences of these actions
Definitely
that the
layman
Federal
and
Reserve
definitely
and the
more
government
understandable and
have
I'm going
seen
to
as
show you the real
a
world
result of
consequences
policies that
these
were made
actions that the Federal
during
Reserve
this
and
time.
the
So,
government have
long
seen
story
as
short, what is wrong?
a
What is
result
wrong
of
is the
policies
quantity
that
theory
were
of money.
made.
So your money supply does not
So,
necessarily mean an increase in
long story short, what is wrong? What is wrong is
your price
quantity
level
theory of
and
money.
your inflation
So your money supply does
and
not
especially
necessarily mean an increase in
with GDP. Now the other thing I want to see with GDP too.
your price level. And your
Now it's not as well
and especially
in terms of correlated as you see with the other ones.
Now the other thing I want to say
Like you
with
do
GDP
see some
too,
definitely some big
Now, it's not
opposites
as
when you see
well-
jumps of inflation.
in terms of correlated. As
So you,
see with
when
the
you
other
do see
ones,
jumps of inflation,
like
you are
do see
looking
some,
at
definitely some big opposites
problems
when
in
you see
terms
jumps
of
inflation.
economics. But you
So
are
when
looking
you
at
see jumps of
also
inflation, you are looking at
when you see
problems in
downward
terms of
inflation
economics.
numbers and you
But
see
you are
downward
looking at also
Fed funds, you're not
when you
necessarily
see
seeing an
downward
increase in
inflation
your
numbers
output.
and
Now
you
your
see
output
downward
since let's say
Fed
1990
you're not
your
necessarily
output has
seeing
been
an increase in
fairly
your output.
constant,
Now,
maybe
your output
slightly downward.
since, let's say,
But since 2008, we've honestly seen a little
Your
bit
output
more
has
of a
fairly constant,
of
maybe
kind of that
slightly
new
downward.
resurgence higher.
But since 2008, we've honestly seen a little
And
bit
now,
more of a
why do we see
of kind of that
where
new resurgence
input
higher.
now in 2018, 2019 was kind of bucking
And
that
now,
trend?
Why do we see
And you know what this trend is?
where
It's a trend that's been going on all
input
along.
now in
You see
2018,
those light
2019 was kind of
colors
bucking that trend.
in the back there? Those are all trend lines.
And you know what
Now
this
you see
trend
the
is? This
trend
trend's
line
been going on
for
along.
all
You
three
see those light
are all
colors
sloping
in the back?
slightly
Those are all
down
trend lines.
from
Now
right
you see
around
the
that
trend
5%
line
level.
for
So
all
you're
three
looking at
are all
especially
sloping slightly down
your, again,
from right
your
around
Fed
that
funds
5%
and your
level.
inflation
So you're looking
sloping
at
downward, as well as you do see
especially
your
your again
output sloping
your Fed
downwards.
funds and your inflation
Now,
sloping downward as well as you
some
do see
say,
your
hey, economics happens anyway because of the fact that we do have
Now,
a rising economy and we have a very established economy, so it's a secular stagnation kind of story where you're like, okay, because we're this large, we can only grow at 1.5%, 1% naturally in a good economy. I find that bullshit. It's just me. I find that bullshit. I just don't think we have solved the right economic model in order to continue that growth so far. And that's just something I believe because some of our economic models are a little bit dried up and washed up. So, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to look at this. We're going to show how we can change this, what we can do to stop it, what are the implications of this, and everything else. And there you go. So, the quantity theory of money is wrong. Classical economics got that wrong. Keynesians were right to criticize it, but they're not right in general. So, that's all I got for you right now. We're going to be coming at you with the next video shortly to describe you the real world consequences, more of the political aspects to this and what we can do to change it. Next video shortly to describe you the real world consequences, and more of the political aspects to this and what we could do to change it. Bye-bye.